Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be going over how we can create a better way to scatter objects onto surfaces inside of Cinema 4D using Houdini. We're going to create another HDA. This one's going to be a little bit more complex and touch a little bit better onto the topic of getting in the mindset of creating things for Cinema 4D specifically. That's going to allow you to maybe increase functionality or better suit things for your needs that may be a little bit more difficult to do inside of Cinema or a little bit more tedious. So just got a quick example here. You can see I've got a bunch of trees scattered onto this landscape here, and I can go ahead and just change any of these settings that I want. That was a little high. Let's maybe drop that down to like 300. And once I start updating some of the other settings here, this will update. So you can see this has changed. And then if I click to the seed, changed again, I can drop this down to 50 if I want, get a lot less trees, change the seed to whatever I want. Or let's say I want more of these trees, but I want a better separation between them. I don't want them so close together. I can affect things this way. So a lot more functionality inside of Cinema 4D than you would normally get from just a simple scatter onto surface, as well as we can also align them to the surface. You will see if we get, like if you look at this tree right here, it's kind of aligned a little bit better to the surface rather than just being straight up and down. It does kind of freak out sometimes, but that's all right. And like I said, it freaks out sometimes. Don't get exactly what you're looking for, but it should be working pretty good. You just kind of got to play with it a little bit. That is kind of one of the bugs of the Houdini plugin. So let's go ahead and jump on in. I actually had the scatter, or not the scatter, but the noise open there. So just open up a new project here, and we're going to jump into a geometry node again. And we are going to create a simple grid again and zoom on out. Let's just up the subdivisions here again, just like we did in the last video, and we're going to drop in a mountain node. This is just going to be for visualization purposes, like I said before. Let's change this up a little bit so we're not getting so much noise, I guess. So the way we scatter stuff in Houdini is through a scatter node. Pretty straightforward, right? So that's going to just scatter a bunch of points along the surface of our object, and then we're going to want to copy our objects onto these points. So we're going to do copy 2 points and drop this in here, and we're going to use a cube just for, actually I lied, we're not going to use a cube. We're going to use another grid, because that is how we're going to actually put our points onto, or our objects onto our object. We're going to copy the objects to this object. So we'll change this size down, something a little bit smaller, and we'll set the rows and columns to 2, just so we have the simplest geometry that we have. And actually, I don't even want it that big. I'm going to use a 0.1 and a 0.1. And you can see now that this has applied this grid, or these grids, to all of the points along our scatter node here. See, they're all there. And if we change this mountain node, change the height, it's going to change dynamically there as well. So let's just set that back. So you may be asking yourself, why, if you know anything about Houdini, why would I not use just a point and just copy, or a vertex and just copy the vertex to each point? for whatever reason, maybe it is actually possible, but I was not able to get vertexes to actually work inside of Cinema 4D. For some reason, you can't, or it wouldn't let me just export straight vertices, which is really weird, or have vertices just show up inside of Cinema. So we're going to use this method instead. So I actually forgot a node here that's going to give us a little bit more control. So let's drop in a fuse node, and this is going to simply just, as we up this value, it's going to change whether or not we have the points merging together, essentially. So if they're too close together, they're going to merge and we won't have as many points, and that's just going to be used so that we don't have anything, or allow us to not have any geometry overlapping inside of Cinema 4D if we need it to not do so, I guess. So let's just set that back to default. You can hold control and middle mouse click, and then it'll reset it to default. So this is fine and dandy. This just creates objects onto our surface here, which is great. But sometimes you may want the alignment of these objects. If you notice, they're all just facing straight upwards. And you may want the actual objects to be facing essentially how the geometry is facing. So it's going to follow the normals of the geometry. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to copy and paste this on over and set it right on next to what we got. And we're going to bring these up a bit and just drop in a normal node here. And you'll understand in a minute why I'm just copying and pasting and not putting in a switch node over here. It's basically for Cinema 4D's usability. So you can see that they're still not following the normals of our plane. So we need to set this to points in our normal node. And you can see that we've got some change, but not exactly what we're looking for. That's because we need to set the grid to a an XY plane. And now you can see that the planes are no longer just facing straight up, they're actually following the curvature of our input, which is exactly what we want. So we can actually just go ahead and get rid of our visualization helpers here. And like I said in the last video, we are going to want to set our object in Cinema, so we need an object merge node. And we're just going to plug those on in. And for Cinema 4D's usability, we want to drop in a switch node so that we can switch between whether or not we want to actually use our nodes over here where we're not using the contours of the geometry that we're inputting, or if we wanted to actually follow the contours of the geometry. So you also may be thinking, why don't we just plug an object merge into each one of these copy to points? Does it work the same way, right? Well, yes, it would work the same way. And we would be able to set in Cinema what we're copying to the surface, which is what we ultimately want. However, if we were to use this scene, for example, and we were to copy these trees, these are pretty heavy polygon trees. That's why if I crank up the number of trees there are in the scene, it gets a little bit bogged down. And if we didn't use the method that I'm using here, just this amount of trees would just bog down the scene astronomically. So we obviously don't want that. We want to actually use Cinema 4D's tools to actually help us out. So just bear with me here and I'll explain more in just a second, but we want to set this HDA up how we need it. So we're going to go ahead, again, we're going to edit the parameter interface, and we're just going to hide these because I don't really care to see them. And we're going to put our folder into the root. And we're going to jump back in here, and like last time, the first thing that we need is our object. And actually, I'm going to name this attributes again. And And I'll set this to our, I'm going to set it to our surface. So that's the surface that we want to copy our points to. And then we'll set a separator. And then here, before we start dropping some of these settings in, we want to actually make sure that we have the same result at the end of both of these copy to points nodes, regardless of what settings we choose in one. And let me just drop a grid back in here just so I can show you what I mean by that. We don't really need the noise in there right now. It's not gonna make that big of a deal. So currently, if I were to set the display flag here and I change this count to 4,000, we have 4,000 instances there, but if we look over here, we still only have 1,000. The reason for that is because they're using different nodes. So we need to actually, I'm just gonna reset that. We're gonna right click, we're gonna go to copy parameter, and then we're gonna go over to this scatter node, and we're going to paste relative references. And that's going to paste it in the channel. Now, we can't use this normal node and end this scatter because then it's just going to do the same thing for both of them. That's why I have this set up this way, so that the switch node is down here and it's switching out after we calculate whether we want to use the normals of what we're inputting or not. So let's go ahead. We're going to do this for max points as well, because we'll probably want to use that. And then let's go back over here and set the seed as well. And that'll be all we need for that. And then we want our fuse to do the exact same thing. So copy that parameter and paste it in here. And then in our grid, we want the size to be the same across both so that we can visualize in our Cinema 4D project the exact same way. So we'll only need the size. That's all we really care about. We won't need to mess with any of these other settings. So now we have all of that set up. We can go back to this scatter, and now we can just drag in this setting. And when we change this now, you can see, I'm just gonna close that out for a second. See, I'm in this tree and we don't have this visible right now. But if I change this, it's gonna change on both. And same with the seed and the max points. But the max points you're not gonna see unless I set it to like 7,000. You can see it limits it to 7,000. Doesn't get any more than that. I'm assuming, I'm not counting. Let's go ahead and reset all these back to normal, and we'll just jump back out because I need to open that back up again. Whoops. And I just want to jump back in here. It looks like our settings didn't save because I closed it out. So I need to drop the separator back into there. And then let's go ahead, drop all these settings in that we want. And let's set this to total copies. And I'll just set these all the same just for my own sanity, my OCD. And we'll do max copies. And then we want the seed as well. So let's just copy. Oops. Okay, there we go. Copy that in there. And then our fuse node, we want the snap distance. And I'm going to put just a separator in between those. And we'll call this minimum distance, because this will be the minimum distance that will allow between each copy, I guess. And then last thing we want, well, not the last thing we want, but one of the last things we want is the size here. And that will call this visualization. Words are hard. Visualization size. Hopefully I didn't spell that one wrong. And then we want a separator again one more time. And then here we're going to actually just put in a toggle. And then we're going to set this to be visualize copies. And just put that in there as well. And now we need to actually hop out of that. I think I just closed that. And I wasn't supposed to because I didn't save. Nope, it did. Okay, thank God. So now you can see that we've set up everything that we want. And then we want to just go copy parameter here. And then we want to go to our switch node and just paste relative references right into there. And now if you see, we change all these settings, change the seed, the minimum distance. And now when I click visualize copies, well, you know, that was the opposite of what I want to do. That was we don't want visualize copies. We want that to be something else. Sorry, I was thinking of a different thing I was working on. So we want this to be not visualize copies, but we want this to be follow contours. Contours. I think that's how you spell it. And now if I were to actually have some distortion in here, let's just set a mountain node. Should have just left this in here earlier. And you can set the size way up here, and you can see we have a little bit of distortion here, but we don't have it there. But if we click this, we should still be seeing it. Change that. Yeah, okay. Sorry, it's just kind of hard to see. So, ooh, it's still not working. What did I do wrong here? Oh, yes. Sorry. We should be seeing it regardless. That's why. Okay. So it had the wrong display flag set. So now if we click that, now you can see that it's following the contours of our geometry. And that didn't work when I did it last time. There we go. So now if I uncheck that, you see that they're flat. I got too many of them. So they're all facing up right now. Let's just set it back a little bit lower. Something like that. And you can see they're all facing up right now. And if I click follow contours, now they've changed and they're all kind of following the contour of our object here. If I actually up the height, you'll see this a lot better. There you go. Now you can see that it's following along the contours of our geometry. So now everything is set up the way we want it. Now we can go ahead and get rid of those and just bring our object merge back as our input and just double check that we got everything we need, which we do. And we can just reset these back to normal. Same with that. And now we can just right click and click create digital asset. I already have this set up. I've already created this, so I'm just gonna let you guys go through that. You can follow the first video. You just basically keep following this through, click, set it all up, and then you should be good. And then we can just jump back in here and let's just create a new project. And we're gonna go ahead and bring in our, actually, copy to points. It's the HDA, not the HIP file. The HIP file is the Houdini project. HDA is actually what we want. And now let's go ahead and just create a landscape here. I'm just gonna scale this up just a little bit. And then you can see here, if we drop our landscape in, it creates our objects along our terrain here, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted. And we can go ahead and change all these settings, get as many copies as we want, and change the seed, get different looks. That's great. And then change whether it's aligning to the surface. And you can see that it is aligning exactly the way we want it. It's doing great. So now how do we actually get the objects to be copied to this copy to points? So that we set up a copy to points node, you know, we should be able to just have everything set up, right? So not exactly. The reason we did it this way was because we want to actually use Cinema 4D's scattering tool. So we want to create a cloner, and I'm just going to drop the number of copies back down to something a little bit less. And let's go ahead, we'll, you know, a cube will work. Let's just scale this way down, and let's make this editable, and we'll just scale it up a little bit as well. So now we have something to copy along, and then we can just go ahead and set this cloner to object, and then put in, sorry, not our cube, we want that into our cloner, and we want our, you actually want this to be placed in there, is that right? Copy to points. We want, wait, that's our, sorry. We want our object here, and it's not set up correctly here because it's thinking, it's setting it to the surface. So it's going to create some onto the surface of some of these, but not all of them. So we want to set this distribution to polygon center. And now we have all of our polygon objects basically being the cloning points of where our geometry is. And if I set the transform here to, I think it's 90 on the rotation, all these will be up and facing out. And if we set this to multi-instance, we will have a lot better playback viewport speed. And we don't have to worry nearly as much about polygon counts, at least for bogging us down. And so that's ultimately the reason that we don't want to copy to points inside of Houdini, because we can't use this multi-instance functionality. And now we can also go in here and create a random effector, and you can see that we can use those just like you can with all of the Mograph tools. Should be able to use all of them and create some really cool looking stuff. You can animate all of this as well and do everything that you normally could inside of Cinema 4D with the cloning tools, but this will just allow you to kind of have a little bit better functionality inside of your cloner. And you know, you can up the minimum separation distance so you don't have any of the objects colliding with each other. If it's something like trees, you don't want them to be too close together because then they're just going to be like overlapping, which sometimes I ran into that just using the straight cloner tools inside of the Cinema 4D, where I just drop the landscape object into the cloner as the cloner and then set it to surface and set a number. So whatever number you set in here, it was going to be our copies, obviously. So the more you have, obviously the slower it's going to be. Sometimes, oh, that's why, because I have this set up. So you can set this minimum separation to be a default of 0. That way, no matter how many points you put into here, it will always match. Your copies will always match however many points you have. It looks like that was a little bit too many. So yeah, you can animate all this stuff. You can animate these settings as well as your effectors and anything that you really want. This just will give you a little bit better control over your placement of objects along surfaces. And then once you're done, you can just turn that off and you won't see your visualization tool there, which is your plane. And we have that scale still in there too, so if we want to change this to be a smaller value so we don't have to look at them and quite as big, you can change all that as well. Get them a lot closer to points. Like I said, we can't really use the vertexes inside of Houdini. You can't just create a vertex and copy it to each of the points. For whatever reason, that doesn't work. I tried for like 2 or 3 hours trying to get that to work, doing different things, and never managed to do so. So hopefully this kind of helped you out. This was, in my opinion, a better way to scatter objects along the surface rather than using just the Cinema 4D tools. You have a little bit more control over things, as well as you can still use all of the Cinema 4D tools of the viewport tools here with the multi-instance, as well as the Mograph random effectors to change things like the rotation and stuff and create some really cool looking things. This is pretty much what I'm going to be using from now on to generate all of my environment scenes, any of my nature scenes where I need to scatter a bunch of like grass or trees or anything like that along the surface of an object. This is pretty much what I'm going to be using for that, because it is going to give me a little bit more control that I need. So we'll jump into some more techniques and some more videos, but hopefully you can start to see kind of how you can build things specifically for Cinema 4D. For example, like putting in the switch node is kind of a big deal in creating stuff specifically for cinema, because without this being here on Houdini, you would just change your display flag on one of these and then you would be good. You wouldn't have to have this switch node in there, or you could just add in this node whenever you need it, but you can't do that inside of Cinema 4D. You have to actually set up things to work for whatever instances of whatever problems you might run into. So whatever functionality that you need to be thinking about that before you start and as you start building your assets here. So hopefully you can see kind of what all you can do with this and how we might be able to use this to further supplement our needs and our abilities inside of Cinema 4D, because Houdini is extremely powerful, and honestly the things that you're going to be able to do with the Houdini engine inside of Cinema 4D is just, it's astronomical, the amount of things that you could do. And I'm super excited to see what people start doing with it, because I think that Houdini is starting to be used more and more, and I think that it's definitely a great tool to be used inside of Cinema 4D. So hopefully this helped you out, and if you have any questions or anything like that, let me know. I am going to continue to make some different HDAs and show you kind of how you can use those inside of Cinema 4D, as well as some more advanced techniques and different things that you can do with Houdini. So thank you guys for watching. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. But thank you guys for watching and have a good day.